Hi, Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Wednesday, January 17th. Another cold day in Little Rock, Arkansas, 7 degrees this morning, and enough ice on the streets that schools were canceled for another day. Perhaps things will be back to normal tomorrow. In Washington, things are normal. Lots of talks centered on Donald Trump, the president. U.S. Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona gave his expected speech criticizing the president and the things he says and the way he operates, particularly in the way that he attacks the media. He says it's bad for institutions in America to do this. He says it's terrible to have somebody who's so sensitive to criticism that he lashes out at anybody and everybody who has anything to say critical about him. Well, that's certainly true. Tom Cotton, the senator from Arkansas, continues to defend the president, even stopping to talk to reporters in a hallway, unlike he normally does. He normally only goes to friendly TV sources, very carefully selected, to defend his defense of the president in making racist remarks about immigrants in a meeting in the White House last week. Tom Cotton's remarks continue to draw fire. Jennifer Rubin, the conservative columnist for the Washington Post, says he's unfit to hold public office, says no TV station should have such a liar on again. Doesn't seem to affect Tom Cotton. Another criticism of Donald Trump from another sort, not quite so exciting perhaps, but Asa Hutchinson, the governor of Arkansas, met with business leaders yesterday in Rogers, Arkansas, and talked about world trade. They are particularly interested in continuing the North American Free Trade Agreement because of the benefits it brings, particularly to agriculture, which sends a lot of agricultural goods to Canada and Mexico. Trump has said he's opposed to NAFTA. The hope is that the business interests will keep NAFTA alive, perhaps with some changes that make it even more favorable to U.S. businesses. The Arkansas Education Department announced yesterday that after a little bit of a holdup, its new plan for education accountability had been approved by the Federal Education Department. I still think there's no magic cure for education, particularly among families that have economic difficulties and other difficulties that make it hard to achieve in school. Also yesterday, the Buffalo Watershed Alliance, which is a protector of the Buffalo National River, our scenic treasure, said that it's time to stop the operation of the hog feeding operation along a creek of a watershed of the Buffalo. The Department of Environmental Quality has said that the permit issued for that facility hadn't been sufficiently vetted. They hadn't met all the regulatory requirements. There's a great danger to the water supply there because of the limestone geology underneath the surface, but the hog farm is trying to keep its permit operating while it appeals this decision in court. Wendell Griffen, the circuit judge in Little Rock, has asked a federal court to keep alive his lawsuit objecting to an Arkansas Supreme Court ban of his hearing death penalty cases. This followed his participation in a death penalty demonstration outside the governor's mansion. He says his First Amendment rights and his religious freedom rights are being violated by being removed from the case. He says he can decide cases fairly and he's entitled to his opinion on the death penalty. I think he's right. I think he's going to have a hard time disturbing this Arkansas Supreme Court's absolute authority over supervisory control of its courts, however. It's a difficult case. Big news in the real estate world in Little Rock today. The Moses Tucker Real Estate firm merged with Newmark Grubb, Arkansas. They'll become the second biggest real estate management and development company in the state. Sad story out of Arkansas has some relevance to Arkansas. 13 members of a family were found chained inside of a house that masqueraded after a fashion as a home school. It was just a way of keeping people out from checking on the children. California has very little oversight of home schools. Arkansas has almost none. And I think most homeschoolers do a good job at what they do, but this does give some indication that there's a reason for government oversight of how children are handled in schools. One way we can keep tabs on them, but in Arkansas we're moving away from, not toward, more oversight of homeschool operations. And finally, let me engage in some personal name dropping. A friend of mine from college, a fraternity brother, made big news, a big story in the New York Times today about a man named Bill Miller, an investment manager from Baltimore who's made a fortune managing mutual funds. He gave $75 million to higher education. No, not to teach computer programmers, not to do specific vocational training, but to help the philosophy department at Johns Hopkins University, where he received a PhD. He says that philosophy helped him become a successful investment manager, but besides that, and this is where he touched my heart, he says, there's just a value to a good liberal arts education and the critical thinking and expansion of the intellect that comes from studying some of these curriculums. Right now in Arkansas, we don't have a high opinion of higher education. We're spending less on it, and if you're not strictly vocationally inclined, somehow it doesn't seem like that's such a big deal. Well, Bill Miller gave $75 million to the philosophy department. Can somebody step up and do something for the French department or perhaps the lyric poets? I'd hope so. I'm Max Brantley. I'm resisting. I'll be back tomorrow.